under your butt.
Da-da-da. Oh, hello. Welcome to episode 123, our Valentine's Day edition of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast. As usual, I'm joined by Mary, a woman who thinks I'm more stupid than Cupid. I am merely an empty chocolate box named Darren. Happy Valentine's Day, Mary. How are you?
I think you're stupid.
Notice
that you're doing the intro for the second week in a row just because I just can't under pressure.
Yeah, and in the time of love and relationships and stuff like that, we don't need that train wreck on such a joyous, happy holiday. So how are you? What's going on?
Well, it's Valentine's Day tomorrow. We are recording episode 123, and it's a story I'm looking forward to talking to you about. But before we get to that, what are you drinking?
Oh, thanks for asking. Hey, this is a special day for asking. I'm drinking, it's called Voodoo Ranger. It's called Juice Force IPA. It has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with anything. I'm drinking it out of my Golden Girls mug because they're always talking about thank you for being a friend. And in the era of Valentine's Day, it's all about love and friendship. So that's why I'm going with this mug. So that being said, since I am a gracious host, and you stole my thunder a second ago by asking me first, but it's okay.
Well, then you bitch if I don't ask you.
Oh, here we go. So what are you drinking?
I'm drinking Kashmir Hero, which is Revolution Brewing, which is a brewery out of Chicago. And I'm drinking out of my John Reynolds mug that I got at the Seminary Ridge Museum a few years ago. And that leads into our episode topic, which has to do with John Reynolds.
Yeah, I mean, it does. For us, we're going to spend our Valentine's Day discussing star-crossed love and war and tragedy. But that's then again how we roll, I suppose. Of all the romantic and sad tales of lost love that occurred throughout the American Civil War, few compared to one between Union Major General John Fulton Reynolds and the mysterious Kate Hewitt. Now, this is a tale of clandestine love and secret engagement, one that really, for the most part, is secret even as of today, stuff's still coming out. People are still talking about it and discovering new details about this love story.
Well, it was a licensed battlefield guide, Jeffrey G. Harding, a few years ago that discovered, along with some help, just, kind of probably what the true story was about it. And there's actually a book that you can get called Gettysburg, Lost Love, The Ill-Fated Romance of General John Reynolds and Kate Hewitt by Jeffrey G. Harding. Again, he's a licensed battlefield guide. But he made a lot of this discovery as to what, we now know to probably be the true story of John Reynolds and his secret fiancee, Kate Hewitt. And I also think that's a reminder that, when you're doing history, that it can change. For a really long time, we thought the story of John and Kate was one thing, and we thought she was this one person. It turned out she wasn't. And that story has changed. And that's the cool thing about doing history is sometimes you uncover some evidence that changes something and changes the story.
Always have an open mind, Mary, when it comes to history. It is not math. It is not science. It is ever changing. But despite the fact that John Reynolds was one of the more revered generals in all the Union Army, and one that's very recognized today, a true A-lister, if there is such a thing in the Civil War, his relationship with this mysterious partner is one that really captures the imagination, and its tragic end is almost unfair. Even at a time in a war when death is a daily occurrence, they were a couple that were clearly opposites in almost every single way as we go through it, but fate did bring them together. And when it did, it sadly also tore them apart. So everyone knows John Reynolds. He was born on September 20th of 1820 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is about 60 miles east of Gettysburg, to his parents, John and Lydia Reynolds, right? Now, from an early age, the highly educated Reynolds, which he was, he's eventually will turn to a military education. Mm-hmm. And he found himself studying at Lancaster County Academy, a school that really still exists today, actually. And then in 1837, he's going to be nominated to attend West Point by a close family friend of the Reynolds, one Senator James Buchanan, of all people. And West Point, he was, middle of the road, just like me in school, finished 26 right out of 50.
I was going to say, he's like almost halfway.
He's right at par, right? But this is a class full of future Civil War officers such as Don Carlos Buell, Richard and Robert Garnett, and Albion Howe. So it's a star-studded class. He's going to graduate from the U.S. Military Academy on July 1st of 1841, and despite very much to ride the horse he's married,
Mhm.
he Reynolds is
Ride the
going to get a
horse.
commission. He's going to get a commission as a brevet second lieutenant in the Third United States Artillery, and he will be stationed at Fort McHenry in Baltimore before he eventually gets shipped off to Fort Moultrie down there in Charleston, South Carolina. Now, the thing about it, though, is he's going to get his combat experience like many other contemporaries in Mexico. He's going to be twice breveted to captain and major. First in Monterey when his men were surrounded, he's going to escape on a horse. He's going to jump on and ride out sideways like a superstar hero to get out of there to get a message while under fire. The second time it'll be during artillery when he's going to be breveted for saving their guns while in Buena Vista. They say the thing about Reynolds is, like many of these people, he was a soldier's soldier.
Yeah.
He was a very popular guy. He was brave. He was daring. And his men and officers loved him. He was the epitome of the army. He really, really was. After Mexico, he kind of bounced around a little bit. He was originally assigned to Fort Preble or up here in Maine. And then he was eventually sent west, young man, to Oregon and California, where he's going to meet George Thomas, of all people, who will be a member of his same artillery battery. He's going to meet Louis Armistead, and he'll develop a close friendship with Winfield Scott Hancock, or Winnie Boy, right?
Whose birthday is tomorrow.
Yeah, happy birthday to Winnie
Day.
Boy, by the way. He's born on Valentine's Day, which is probably appropriate if you think about it.
Because he likes chocolate.
And he absolutely. He probably the big Reese's peanut butter cups was really big ones, right? But he was born on this day in 1824, just outside of Philadelphia, and that's where he was. 1857, Reynolds is going to participate in a Utah expedition, along again with fellow Civil War generals Hancock and Albert Sidney Johnson. Basically, the Mormons up in Utah didn't really feel they needed to pay taxes to the United States. The U.S. Army went up there to remind them that they do, and at the end of the day, they pay taxes. That's pretty much what it was.
You don't want to be skirting on your taxes or your loans.
Not around this time of year. It's coming up, tax day, right? But while this is all happening, Reynolds' career is moving in different places. There's another story developing in California, which is going to be basically a woman living her life, a woman from Owego, New York, named Catherine Mary Hewitt, and who went by the name Kate.
Yes, and she was born. It's kind of disputed as to when she was born, but they've settled now on a probably birth date of April 1st, 1836 in Owego, New York, as you said. She loses her mother at a very young age. So she's an orphan, which is, pretty sad. Like, her story starts off pretty sad. But she does manage to receive a relatively good education. So she's an educated woman. In 1856, she leaves for San Francisco to go be a governess or nanny to a well-to-do household. It could have been relatives. Again, it's not known. Her story is it's still very, there's not a lot.
Well, it is, but to compare and contrast with Reynolds, I mean, while Reynolds was living somewhat of a privileged life, Kate wasn't. Like you said before, she's an orphan. She's got a brother Benjamin, and so for the most part, like you said, she does educate herself pretty well, for the most part. But when she's in her early to mid 20s, like you said, she's gonna go to Northern California where the girls are warm.
Yep.
Katy
Perry. I do.
I don't know.
Well,
obviously, it's Steve Miller Band, Mary. Oh, God, one less chocolate for your Valentine's Day candy for that one. But she's going to go to San Francisco and Sacramento, and she's going to work, like you said, as a governess, and she's going to struggle. And again, she's young, she's by herself in these post-gold rush days in Northern California. And, like the girl in the Poison video, she's going to basically have to find ways to keep her life going. And what does she do?
She gets involved in what has been called the world's oldest profession, prostitution, basically. But she also gets involved in a scandalous affair. And it's so bad that a newspaper reporter made false accusations about her, and accused her of loving money better than her heart's affections. But Kate, she came back at this reporter and said, "I do not assume the garb of hypocrisy as thousands do to palliate that which is wrong. But I do assert that however unfortunate I may be in my position in society, the purpose of my life and the impulses of my heart may be no less generous and noble than those of my sex who have been better protected from the cruel wrongs I have been subjected to.
Right.
So
So
she does make it sound like she had no other choice. And I think that was the case with, unfortunately, women at this time, as they got themselves into, like, struggling financially. She's single, obviously, and it just doesn't work. Like, she's not making money and she needs to.
no, I mean, just picture me. She's young, and she's a prostitute. I mean, she is what it is. I mean, she's doing that, but she does get involved in some sort of very famous, or very, I don't want to say famous, but basically a rich dude in
Yeah.
California, and she has an affair with this guy. She does go by the alias Kate Wentworth.
Yep.
So she did kind of hide her name a little bit. The newspaper did glom onto this story for her. And to your point, she absolutely had to defend herself, and she really wanted to rebut everything that was said and kind of rebuild her reputation. Her life from this point on is all about retribution and fixing her life. And it's very clear that she does. Her life is spinning out of control, and she felt the overwhelming need to redeem herself. This means starting new and moving back east to New York. So she's just going to say the hell with this. She's going to leave California. She's going to go east. Now, while this is all going on, John Reynolds is going to receive new orders. He's also going to be leaving the West Coast and return to West Point, New York, where he'll become the military academy's new commandant of cadets, a job that he's going to hold from September 1860 until June of 1861. Now, Reynolds, he's 39 years old. He's a bachelor. He's living the dream.
Yep.
He's going to begin to basically travel east by boarding the SS Golden Age in San Francisco, right? Little did he know that he was boarding the Love Boat, Mary. That's what he was doing, right? Whether or not that Isaac was there greeting him, but we don't know that. We don't know. But he's going to go on the boat. The details are unknown, but on this boat traveling east too was, guess who? Was Kate Hewitt. Now, it's easy to use your Valentine's Day imagination, just picturing their first meeting, looking across the ocean, their eyes meeting, hearts are fluttering. Or maybe it's met in line for the bathroom, who knows? Yep. But at some point, the reality was they're going to meet on this boat, and letters from Kate to Reynolds' family later on, she talks about how they first met. But unfortunately, the details of the encounter just weren't mentioned. Yeah, so who knows?
There are passenger lists, though, from this voyage, and it does list a Miss C. Hewitt and a Major Reynolds as passengers. So we do know that they were on the same boat together.
Well, there was. She wrote about it. There's no question. No, it's clear by them, though, that this voyage, not only that they met, but they quickly fell for each other hard. In the relationship between this up-and-coming Union general and this troubled governor's turned prostitute that was putting her life back together again, this is where the relationship started. They're going to move out, they're going to move east, they're going to change ships, and that final leg of their journey to New York is going to be aboard the SS North Star, which is kind of fitting because that's what Reynolds was. He was a rising North Star. Yep. That's exactly what he was. They're going to get to New York on August 13th of 1861, and the Civil War has begun at this point. But they knew at this point that their time was borrowed. They knew at some point he was going to get the phone call, so they knew that this relationship was going to be brief. Now, first, though, Reynolds had to go back to West Point, and the new commandant, again, knew his tenure at his old alma mater wasn't going to probably be too long. I mean, they all knew what the scoop was. While Johns did his duty at West Point, Kate is going to continue her personal reclamation project to cleanse herself, especially her soul, right? So in the fall of 1861, Kate is going to enter Eden Hall Academy of the Sacred Heart near Philly, where basically over the previous 7 months to this point, she's going to convert to Catholicism. Yep. Now, all the while, her love for John, even in the separation, is growing stronger with each passing day.
Yeah, well, there was letters they wrote that the wax seal that Kate put on them had his West Point stamp. So by that point, they might have been engaged. She obviously had his West Point ring, which was would have been like a promise.
Well, that's what she used for the stamp.
Yeah.
Was the ring. So, but even that, eventually, the day is going to come when John's going to get his orders to go off to war. And it was around this time, probably before Kate left for Eden Hall Academy, that that they secretly became engaged. And it was clear, based on the letters, that when the war was over, they were going to get married. That was
Yeah.
the deal, right? That's how it sounds anyway. But again, it's up in the air. Now, Kate will leave Edenhall Academy in July of 1861. So the engagement likely took place right around this time.
Yeah.
He probably did. Who knows if he sent a balloon gram or who knows what he
Balloon
did,
gram.
right? Who knows? Maybe he did. Maybe one of those, those teddy bears,
Yeah.
Vermont teddy bears.
Oh,
You seen those,
God.
Mary? The Vermont teddy
No.
bear. But the thing about it, though, is one of the reasons for their secrecy was their religions. Now, nowadays, you look back at this, it's like, well, what's the big deal? Reynolds was a Protestant. Some sources list him as a Presbyterian,
Yeah.
but whatever he was not a Catholic. Kate was a new Catholic. Back in the 1860s, Mary, I don't know if you know this, but a marriage between a Protestant and a Catholic, especially a prominent military officer, was forbidden.
Yeah.
It was very controversial. But regardless, they're going to get engaged, and they really, they couldn't wait for the war to be over, so they can marry each other and live out their days.
Yeah.
And it's not tough to imagine this. It's sad, but you think about how it all turned itself out. But you see how it was. Like you mentioned before, John is entrusting Kate with his West Point ring.
Yeah.
And so once they get engaged, and that's probably his version of engagement ring, if you think about it.
Yeah. Well, I would think so.
Did.
Like, who knows what his money situation was like? Like,
he probably said, "Will you marry me? Beat Navy." That's exactly what his line probably was, as he gave her the ring, right? But for the most part, but you can see how that went. They both knew that war was a dangerous thing, and tomorrow is promised to nobody. So around this time, Kate is going to make this vow.
Yeah, and this was found out because of a letter that John's sister Jenny explained it later on, that Kate had John's consent to enter a religious life should she lose him. So if he's killed in the war, she would become a nun, is what she has consent to do.
And that's debated because it says, she said, was she going to go into religious order? Because it was never really a nun.
It's never really
thing,
it's not really, and that was something else too, that there's a parallel with McPherson's fiance, who actually hers was similar, where she never married after McPherson died. So there was not. So I think this was maybe a common thing in the Civil War that the women would say, "Well, I'm not going to get married to anybody, or I'm just going to enter a religious life." And who knows what that exactly meant, becoming a nun or just, not getting married and just being religious,
I mean, who knows? But, while the war is progressing, Reynolds' star is going to continue to rise, and he's going to receive a bunch of assignments quickly. So real quick, we'll talk, everybody knows John Reynolds, but there's some cool details about Reynolds. August of 1861, Reynolds is ordered to the Union's coastal defenses on the outer banks of North Carolina, Cape Hatteras. But before long, General George McClellan is going to change his orders. August 20th of 1861, he's going to be named Brigadier General. It was given the 1st Brigade of Pennsylvania Reserves, the 1st, 2nd, 5th, 8th, and 13th under George McCall's division in the 5th Corps under Fitzporter. Now, Reynolds was a staunch Unionist. And we got to talk about this, Mary. Yep. He was not an abolitionist. He wasn't, okay? He's fighting to save the Union and considered abolitionists a problem. He did. When John Brown was hanged, Reynolds, his quote was, "If a few more abolitionists striped were hanged, it would effectively stop the agitation for a time." That's the quote he had. So it doesn't mean anything more than the fact that he's fighting for his country. He wasn't fighting for social issues. He was fighting for the country.
But that's like a lot of them were as well. Like that's how that's how General Sherman was as well. So they're not, and I think it's a good thing to mention about them, that this was kind of
Speaking of Sherman, look at that right there.
Jeez. For our viewers on YouTube.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Drawn by General Ling.
How you doing? Exactly. Anyway, but the thing about it though is his Pennsylvania men would they're going to see battle in the summer of 1862. It's the 7 Days Battle. At the Battle of Gaines' Mill. In June 27th of 1862, Reynolds has that experience, that embarrassment that's going to take place.
Oh, he falls asleep.
While his brigade is covering the rear guard of the Union Army as they're retreating, Reynolds is going to take a nap under a tree at Botswana Swamp. And while he slept, his men, they left him behind. And So he's going to awake and he's going to look up, and the first face he's going to see is General D.H. Hill staring down at
Who was
him.
a friend of his.
Who's a friend. He's going to be famously quoted saying, "John, these are the fortunes of war, but you are my prisoner."
I can't imagine what Reynolds said to him.
Well, he probably didn't like that too much. Reynolds is going to get shipped off to Libby. He's going to be shipped off to Libby Prison in Richmond, where he's going to be exchanged. Not long after, actually, on August the 15th, he'll be exchanged for Confederate General Lloyd Thielman, who had been held in Fort Warren here in Boston, Mary, since his capture of Fort Henry in February of 1862. So he's going to get exchanged pretty quickly. But despite this, Reynolds is being closely watched by the guy with the hat in Washington.
Yeah.
Abraham Lincoln, if you've heard him.
Whose birthday was yesterday.
His birthday was yesterday, as a matter of fact. Reynolds, or Lincoln rather, for whatever reason, was taking a shine to Reynolds. He just did. So by the fall of 1862, Reynolds is going to be promoted to Major General, and then he'll be given command of the First Corps of Volunteers, right? Now, despite his corps remaining back in Fredericksburg during the Battle of Chancellorsville, Lincoln basically offered command of the Army of Potomac to Reynolds to replace Joseph Hooker, and it just didn't happen.
Reynolds, I think his reasons for it. I mean, it's still disputed what his reasons for, but one of the theories is that he basically said to Lincoln, "Can you give me full control of the Army of the Potomac?" In other words, stop. He kind of saw Lincoln as meddling. He'd seen what had happened to. I think he'd seen what had happened to McClellan, what had happened to Burnside, and now Hooker is clearly not going to be in command for much long, but he says, "Can you give me full control?" And Lincoln's like, I'm not willing to. And Reynolds is like, okay, then I don't want anything to do with this. That's one of the stories behind. It's not 100% known, but that is one of the stories behind why he refused the command.
Think about it. He's seeing firsthand Burnside and Hooker being poked around by Halleck and Stanton and Lincoln like a little puppet, and he sees their reputation being sullied. Burnside, his name is, watch it now, Mud. See what I did there, right? And then Hooker is getting ripped apart politically, and he's like, things are going pretty good for me. I don't know if I really want this bad job. I think I'm cool. But the interesting about it, though, was even after noping Lincoln, he's still gonna get his career rising. As we head into the Gettysburg campaign, he'll be given the left wing of the Army of the Potomac, the 1st, the 3rd, and the 11th Corps. And for the most part, his fate is going to take him to Gettysburg. We're going to talk about this real quick. Gettysburg of July 1st, 1863. He's going there to relieve John Buford, whose cavalry has been delaying the Confederates who were driving into town from the west. Now, again, Reynolds was a very popular officer amongst his men because, like I said, he was a soldier. He rode up front with his men. He gave away DQ gift cards, the whole deal. He's the very epitome of a popular and strong leader, right? We talk a lot about Hancock with this, right? Kind of similar, except Reynolds has been around longer. Yeah, in that level.
And I think Reynolds is a little bit more, where Hancock was more, I want to say, extroverted and maybe kind of in your face. I don't know if Reynolds was that way, but they still possessed obviously the same types of leadership skills. But I think Hancock might have been a little bit more extroverted. Reynolds to me comes across as maybe a little quieter.
Well, Reynolds to his men was the army.
Yeah,
he was the face of the army. He was when you thought about your corps, your division, Reynolds was the face. He was very popular. So when Reynolds arrives at Jan Herbst's woodlot on July 1st of 1863 with the members of the famous Iron Brigade, they're driving back James Archer's brigade of Tennesseans and Alabamians who are assaulting McPherson's Ridge. Everyone knows the story. Reportedly, Reynolds is riding up front with the 2nd Wisconsin, a regiment that sustained an amazing 77% casualties, by the way.
Crazy.
We talked about the 6th. We're talking about the 2nd. We're talking about the 2nd Wisconsin, right? He's going to yell, "Forward, men, forward, for God's sakes, drive those men out of those woods." And he's going to get dropped. He's going to get shot in the back of the head and the upper neck. And he's going to be killed instantly. Now, introducing Charles Vail, who was a big part of this story. Charles Vail is a staffer for Reynolds. He's stunned to see the general fall, a man that he respected and he loved. And again, like many of his men, Reynolds was the whole thing. Vail's going to write of this. He's going to write, General Reynolds fell upon his face, his arms outstretched towards the enemy. I at once sprang forward from my horse and went to his side. The thing about it, though, is at first they just thought he was stunned. They didn't see any marks. They just thought he was just
there was
out
no
like a
blood
light.
that was visible.
There was nothing. But then he wrote, you know, he talked about feeling the hole in the back of his head. He finds that. And another one of Reynolds' staff officers, a guy named Major Joseph Rosengartner, wrote that even the Confederates were stunned to see Reynolds fall.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna write, as the dead body of General Reynolds was carried off the field, the captured Confederates manifested their respect for the fallen Union general. Right? This is who John Reynolds was. This was big time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just because he'll be the highest ranking officer to be killed at the Battle of Gettysburg. It's because who he was. He was John Reynolds.
He'd already made a name for himself before the Civil War with all, all the different he'd been at like Fort Moultrie. He'd been at all these other different bases, basically East Coast, West Coast, South, North, all over the place.
Yeah.
He was well known.
I mean, a universally loved and respected military man. And the loss sent shockwaves throughout the army and the country. This is like Michael Jackson dying. Mm. Like, holy crap! That's how they. But that not to make light, but that's what it was. Mm. And I think it's important to talk a little bit real quick about Reynolds' dead body and its return home to Lancaster, because it tells a remarkable story of devotion by his men that's going to sadly lead him back to Kate Hewitt, right? So after Reynolds falls, he's going to land on the side of his face, and Vale is going to notice a slight bruise on it. And it becomes of utmost importance for Reynolds' staff to get him home, back, because you're going to stay with him, right? The first place they're going to take him is to a small house on modern-day Steinway Avenue, the George House. Yep. Everybody knows the George house.
Right across from the DQ.
It's an old-timey studio that's called Servants, near the DQ to the Dobbin House, not far from Pickett's Buffet, not far from the Great Gettysburg T-shirt Company, all that area right down there. That's where his body's going to be taken. Now there, two of Reynolds' most loyal staffers, Charles Vale, we talked about, and Joseph Rosengartner, we talked about, they're going to devise a plan to get him back to Lancaster, right? The first thing they need to do is they need to find him a coffin.
Yeah.
So they're going to go into town to try to find this. Now, keep in mind, there's a battle going on.
And so it's the first day, so a lot of it is happening. It's starting to happen in the town as well.
So they couldn't get to the Walmart on York. So they had to figure something out.
Walmart probably wouldn't have had a coffin. I've been there before.
No, probably not. I probably would have actually. But so they're going to go back into town, but they can't find one. The best they can do is find a packing crate. Now, John Reynolds was 6 feet tall, and the packing crate they found was 5'6". Oof. So they put him in the box, and his feet from his calves are sticking out of the bottom.
Oh my God.
That's what this is, right? But again, this is the best they can do. Meanwhile, word is going to be sent to George Meade of what happened, who reportedly was absolutely devastated at this news, as was all the way top to the bottom. Another guy who was devastated was Hancock, who around this time, because he was his friend, around this time is going to jump on that ambulance or head back into town. So you can only imagine what's going on in old Winnie Boy's head.
Yeah.
It's close, so that's kind of how it is. So when the Army has to deal with the death of Reynolds on a military level, Vale and Rosengartner are dealing with it on a personal level. And all they want is to get him back to Lancaster. That's all they want. The battle, it doesn't matter anymore. They're going to bring in a third member of Reynolds' staff, a guy named Sergeant R.B. Clevenger. And they're going to decide the three of them are going to personally stay with the body until it arrives back home for burial. Mm-hmm. So they're going to take control of it. There's a problem, though. First of all, Lancaster is about 60 miles east of Gettysburg. It's an easy shot, okay? But there's something going on in town, which is the battle. Also, Jeb Stuart's floating around somewhere. They don't know where he is. So they can't just take that easy 50-mile trip east. They got to make an odyssey to get him back. What they're going to have to do is they're going to have to go south. Now, they're going to basically have to go south down the Tawnytown Road to a town called Union Bridge, Maryland, and take the train to Baltimore and then take a boat up the Delaware River to Philadelphia, and then take him to Lancaster. That's the route they're going to have
And
to
keep in
do.
mind, it's warm out.
It's warm out. Vale is going to ride on top of Reynolds' horse, Fiancee,
Yeah.
right? And Rosengartner and Clevenger are going to ride with the body in the wagon. Just picture them rolling up down Tawnytown with the box, with feet sticking out the end.
Jeez.
Now, this is what it was. As they're moving down Tawnytown Road south, what's going on? The second, third corps are coming up the road. Mm. So they're seeing this as they're going by, and they're hearing rumors of Reynolds being dead, and now they see Reynolds in this box. So as they're passing by, this stunned silence of Revere, watching him go by, like just you can just imagine. Their morale's already low at this point. Yeah. Now they see one of their favorite generals, even if it's not even in their corps, go by in a box with his feet sticking out the end. Right? Just think of this situation. They're going to make it to Union Bridge early on July 2nd, and they're going to take Reynolds' body to a guy named John Berger, who was a railroad carpenter. And from there, they're going to have a coffin made, so that's going to fit. Mm-hmm. Next, they're going to go to John Forney's undertaking shop. Now, again, this is 24 hours after his death. He hasn't been embalmed yet, and it's hot. Yeah. And that bruise I mentioned on the side of his face is now jet black, covering most of his face.
Oh God.
That's the situation they're dealing with. Forney didn't embalm him though. He packed his body in ice in that coffin and put the body on a train that was going to be headed southwest to the Union Supply Hub in Westminster, Maryland, right, which is the very end of Emmitsburg Road. At this point, the Battle of Gettysburg is in its second day. Westminster is a supply hub. So you can imagine the hustle and bustle, trains coming in, going out with supplies. What's going to happen next is going to show how much respect the Army has for Reynolds, right? On orders of Railroad Chief Herman Haupt, he is going to basically order all the Army trains to move aside at this moment so Reynolds' body can pass through quickly on the way to Baltimore. So while the battle's going on, they need supplies, they need all this and that. He stops the show so his train can go through. Wow. Again, that's who Reynolds was. And they want it because it's important that he gets back home to his family. That's the whole thing when they see him. Now, not longer later, that train carrying the body, along with those 3 bodyguards, is going to arrive in Baltimore, and they're going to quickly take the body to an embalming studio of a guy named James Weaver, who's going to quickly embalm John Reynolds and prepare him for viewing. I mean, you can imagine it's probably not a very pretty sight at this point. It's
not looking too good at this point.
But again, Weaver is one of the best in the business, and by all reports, he did a good job making Reynolds whatever presentable, right? Fun fact about Weaver, by the way, within a week, he's also going to be embalming General Samuel Zook, as well as Edward Cross, who will both be killed on that day on July 2nd at the wheat fields. So he's got a lot of work coming up, unfortunately, for Weaver, right? Wow. So now embalmed and in his casket, Reynolds is going to go down to Baltimore's Inner Harbor to the Light Street Wharf, which is not far from Camden Yards for a baseball fan, married to the Orioles, right? And they're going to board a boat for Philly. Now, this is late on July 2nd. This vessel sails with the Delaware River and is going to arrive in Philadelphia the next day on July 3rd. And there to greet the boat are Reynolds' sisters, Lydia, Catherine, Harriet, and Eleanor, right? Yeah. They've obviously been messaged of the death of their brother and told where to go, blah, 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 right? Catherine, she has a house in Philadelphia on Spruce Street in Philly, right? And so she's going to, once they take possession of the body, they're going to take him to her house where it basically is going to lie in state for the rest of the day. Yeah. And until the next day on July 4th, when it's going to be taken back to Lancaster. Reynolds' 3 stabbers, Clevenger, Vale, and Rosengartner, they're still there, and they're refusing to leave the body until he's buried. Yeah. They're going to stay with their man. Now, while John Reynolds' body is lying in state at his sister Catherine's house, they hear a knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. And when they answer it, they're going to get a surprise of a lifetime.
Yep. It's none other than Reynolds' secret fiancee, Kate Hewitt, at the door.
The 27-year-old Kate, who's going to introduce herself as John Reynolds' fiancée. Now, again, for the sisters, This was a stunner, absolute stunner, because they probably hadn't been asked to be bridesmaids yet. They're probably mad at that moment, right? But you could only imagine, because they had no idea their brother was involved with anybody. When so suddenly, suddenly that's you're finding all this out. So naturally, she wants to see John's body, and so immediately they take her to him. Now, the thing about it, it's rumors how Kate found out about the death.
Yeah.
There's one school of thought that says she read it in the newspapers on the second. And it's very possible. There's another stream of thought that she was told of the death by Hancock.
Interesting.
Because Hancock would have been the only guy realistically that Reynolds would have told, and he probably would have kept it quiet. And there's some debate about that, but some people think that Hancock found out, had sent a message to her, that he knew what was going on.
I could see that happening.
Right. And others think that she just read in the newspaper. But again, what's great about this story is so much is still coming out about it, right? This is like this just happened. So Kate is going to begin to tell these sisters about how they met back in California, how she converted to Catholicism in 1861. But despite the religious differences, again, these people are Protestants. Kate's a Catholic. They greeted her like family, like they were warm to her. Yeah. And she immediately became greeted by the Reynolds family. She became basically one of them. Ellie Reynolds, she's going to write to brother William, a captain in the United States Navy, saying, she seems like a very superior person. With all the regret that he, John, had not told some of us about her, that we had not known her, yet we are happy she came and had all the comfort that we could offer her. Sometimes these quotes refer to her as Jenny for some reason, which is weird because I don't think he had a sister named Jenny.
No.
But who knows? Maybe it was a nickname. But she also told them about the promise she made to John that if he died, that she was going to devote her life to religion.
Yeah. And she also, when she got there, she was very together, coming across as very strong. And when she saw his body, that's when she broke down.
Exactly.
I think that's when reality hit her. She was probably going on adrenaline from the moment she found out. And she's like, I just have to get to him to see him one final time. And then when she saw his body, she broke down. But yeah, she does very quickly establish a close relationship with his, especially his sisters. I think he was especially close with like Ellie, was the one that she was really close with.
Oh, there's no question. She's going to continue, but we're going to talk about this in a second. But after she tells him that vow, what she's going to do, history says that she went off to the convent, she died. But we're going to talk about that in a little bit, how that kind of changed in recent history. But Ellie's, in that same letter, she's going to write to William. She's going to say, Kate has his consent to enter a religious convent should she lose him, and now she intends to do so as the world has no interest for her anymore. Okay. Now, Kate says, Kate has given him first to God, then to his country, and then to herself. To him I stand third. That's how she saw it. Now, again, Ellie is going to say at this meeting with this devastated Kate Hewitt that we feel so for her. 'Tis like crushing the life out of her.
Yep.
So you could just imagine. I mean, you're planning on getting married. You're young. Your life is about putting its pieces back together again. You finally find the guy who's going to put your life together again, and he just dies, right? And with John gone, and Kate basically accepting the rest of her life would be a service to her faith, she's going to return John's West Point ring to the Reynolds family.
Yep.
She's going to write how about the very moment, this moment when she does this to her brother again, she's going to say she kissed it and put it on the glass plate, which is the glass plate of covering his face on the coffin.
Yep.
She put it right on top of that glass plate. It was a great struggle. Kate's only request to the family in regards to John's ring was never let it be tainted by a disloyal hand. He is true for that.
Oh.
It's sad.
And is there a story behind what happened to the effects that he had? The gold ring that was inscribed with Dear Kate and
we'll talk about that. If somebody has some patience, we'll talk about that, right? But the next day is July 4th, and John's body is going to make its final journey to Lancaster, where he'll be laid to rest in Lancaster Cemetery. Now, those three faithful staffers we talked about, Vale, Rosa Garner, and Clevenger, their jobs are completed, and they're going to return to the Army of the Potomac. And they're hearing about the battle victory at Gettysburg. Maybe they were hearing something about Vicksburg. We don't
Mhm.
know. But you can only imagine how bittersweet it was for them
Yeah.
in this very moment. So, not long after his burial, Major William Riddle, no relation to Tom Riddle, as far as we know, Mary. We don't
Tom
know
Riddle.
that. Okay.
Voldemort.
Another of Reynolds' staff officers, he's going to write a list of items that he found on Reynolds' body to a fellow officer. And this is what Riddle wrote, to your point. On the general's little finger was that gold ring I spoke of bearing the words, Dear Kate, on the inside, which he valued very highly. He wore about his neck a short silken string, those two emblems of the Catholic faith, a heart and cross. So that's what happened to him. Who knows? But they talk about it. And this report that Riddle wrote would be later. This is 1864. He's going to write. This is down the road a little bit, so that's later. But we're going to talk about Kate the rest of her life with this. I mean, fortunately, John is buried. He's gone. Kate is going to keep that promise to John and soon will enter the religious life by joining the Daughters of Charity in Emmitsburg, Maryland. Mm-hmm. She will join using the name Sister Hildegardis.
I thought that was an interesting choice. I was like,
what?
I thought that was an interesting choice.
I'm speaking. It sounds like a Hogwarts name.
I know. I was like,
oh,
what is this?
But she was going to be Sister Hildegardis. We don't know why. But at some point, while she was a seminarian at the Daughter of Charity, who's going to come visit her is Charles Vail again. That one of those three guys who was so close with his body, as well as two of John's sisters. Mm-hmm. They're going to come pay a visit to Kate. Now, during this visit, Kate gave Vail an embroidered handkerchief that she was making for John at the time of his death, which featured a U.S. coat of arms. Now, this is one thing that not a lot of people know about Kate. She was a very talented artist and embroiderer.
Very talented.
Okay. Now, whether she could draw pictures of Sherman like this, we don't know.
Oh, my God.
But she was very good at embroidery. That's what she was. And we'll talk about that. But Kate's life after entering the Daughter of Charity, it has some gaps. Okay. But by all accounts, she's only going to be there a few years. And in September of 1868 or so, and recent study begs this question. We talk about the recent study with this, was whether she left on her own or whether she was booted out.
It's debated.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. But regardless, at the end of the day, Kate is going to reappear in New York. And after research by recent historians, they're going to try to locate her whereabouts after leaving the Daughters of Charity. And there was also a question of which Kate Hewitt we're talking about here. Mm-hmm. And that's the interesting thing about it. You mentioned the census reports.
Yep.
U.S. Census records show that there were two women named Catherine Mary Hewitt who lived in New York late in the 19th century, one in Albany, New York, Mary, and another in the town of Stillwater. Now, through a lot of legwork by some contemporaries, like we talked about earlier, and mainly through census data, the Albany case was the one who was deemed the John Reynolds' former fiance.
Just to note, we do know it's called Albany, New York.
Yes.
It's just a joke.
It's a long story.
That we call it Albany.
No. But records did show that she did leave the order. It was sent on a mission to teach at a school called St. Joseph's School in Albany, New York, and probably got to Albany around January of 1866 while she was still part of that order. But she was out of the order by 1868. She was gone. Kate's going to go teach at a school called the Select School in 1868 at that point. Sometime in 1871, Kate is going to, she's an embroiderer. She's really good. She's going to make an ornate banner for the St. Jean Baptiste Society of Albany that was 7 feet high and 5 feet wide, as well as a similar one that was used as part of a display at the Centennial exhibition in Philadelphia from 1875 to 1876, right? When the exposition ended, that banner was sold at auction for $2,000, which is about $60,000 in today's money.
That's crazy. Wow.
But it's sad though, she never saw the money because it was sold after she died. But that's how it was. But those census records, they seem to prove that Kate did not honor her promise to John.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where myth and reality kind of go in two different directions. Because she vowed never to marry him. Because records show that on June 24th of 1874, Kate is going to marry a Joseph P. Ford, a florist, in upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she liked flowers.
Yep. He's a florist.
Right. But he was a florist, and they're going to be married at St. Joseph's Church. And Joseph and Catherine Ford were living as husband and wife in Albany as of June 1st, 1875. Mm-hmm. So all the stars line up that this is Kate Hewitt. So she did dedicate her life to religion, but something happened and it just didn't take. And whether she left on her own or whether she was booted, she's going to leave. She's going to meet Joe Ford, with a P, by the way.
Yep.
And she's going to end up marrying him. Now, for most of Kate's adult life, she had a cough.
Yep.
She had basically kind of like walking tuberculosis.
Yeah, Reynolds' sister discusses that even when she knew her, that she had like kind of a nagging cough. And as you said, it's suspected to be tuberculosis, which at that time was deadly.
It was, and once you got it, you didn't. It wasn't usually a happy ending, but it did get significantly worse heading into 1876. According to census records, Kate Hewitt Ford died on October 6, 1876, and her obituary describes her as a lady of high abilities, an earnest and consistent Christian, as well known and highly respected. It also listed the cause of death as consumption, which is tuberculosis. Yeah. So again, it makes sense. Now, soon after her death, that banner I mentioned in Philadelphia, it won a special award. It was given to her. The award was given her posthumously after she died. So she didn't enjoy the satisfaction of it, nor did she enjoy the satisfaction of that $60,000 in today's money, because she was gone at that point.
And she was also 39 years old when she died, which is the same age that John Reynolds was when when they met.
Life can be circular, Mary, no question about that. Kate lists her obituary lists her burial at St. Agnes Catholic Cemetery in Menands, Albany County, which by happenstance is also the same cemetery where many of those sisters who taught at St. Joseph's are also buried. In fact, that doesn't mean anything, but it's just kind of whatever.
It's an interesting point, that this probably is John Reynolds' Kate Hewitt.
It was. But for years, though, many thought the other Kate Hewitt, the one from Stillwater, New York, was John's fiancee. If you go onto places like Find a Grave, you'll still see the wrong gravestone, right? But recent study has gone a long way now into finding out what happened to the real Kate after John's death and after she left the religious order. That's why it's always important to keep studying, like you said earlier, because stuff comes out.
Yeah.
Now, it's easy to read around Valentine's Day the story of John Reynolds and Kate Hewitt and feel sad about the fate that separated them. But it's also easy to see how much impact they had on each other, if you really think about it. For John, a rigid military man, Kate offered him a future, and after the war that he clearly looked forward to. And for Kate, if you think about it, he offered her what? He offered her redemption from a life that she felt was one that she lived very unvirtuously. And her honoring that vow to join that religious order, if he died, was one that she followed through on. So though she did eventually find love again and move on and marry, it's hard to imagine that she didn't spend her entire life after July 1st of 1863 wondering what if, right? And that what if is the saddest part of the story.
Exactly.
No doubt about it.
And it's like thousands of other of these stories in the Civil War. And Reynolds is remembered today where she's buried because there was some funds raised a few years ago to put a marker on her grave, and it says in memoriam Catherine Hewitt Ford, April 1st, 1836 to October 6th, 1876. Devout Christian, loving wife of Joseph B. Ford, one-time fiancee of Major General John F. Reynolds, who was killed in action at the Battle of Gettysburg. So he is still part of her history. So in a way, they're still kind of tied together in that way. But as we said, this is one of many stories. You have McPherson, who was killed, like James B. McPherson, who was killed at the Battle of Atlanta. He had asked for leave from Sherman to go marry his fiancee, and Sherman had said no. And he ends up getting killed, and his fiancee will spend a year in mourning, locked in her room. And I don't think she ever marries again. You have, on the Confederate side, you have General Patrick Cleburne, who had met Sue Tarleton at the wedding of General Hardee, and Sue and Patrick became engaged soon after that. He's unable to marry her because he gets killed at the Battle of Franklin, and she, like Kate, gets married but dies soon after. She doesn't. Sue Tarleton also does not live very long. So there are stories like this that are sad on both sides of the Civil War. But it's a reminder. It's a reminder of the human side, the other side of it that's going on. That it's not just these battles. That these guys are still having these lives outside of it, and they have women that they love and all that too.
At the end of the day, these are all people. They're all humans. They've all got dreams. They've all got loves. They've all got aspirations. They've got everything like anybody does nowadays. So when you look at these folks and you study them and you see those old crusty black and white pictures and you see the tintypes, there's always a story. Always look at the eyes, Mary. Yeah. Always look at the eyes. The eyes tell the story.
Well, it's like you said in that in our episode of Hiram Granberry, that famous picture of him. When that was taken, he had found out about his wife and that she was terminally ill. And you can see the sadness in his eyes, right? So it's these human stories, that are just as much of the Civil War history as the battles are.
Absolutely. And for John Reynolds, a guy who was loved by his men, loved by his officers, loved by his foot soldiers, his death was a shocker. But finding out that he, had a secret life of, and I don't think he was trying to hide it. I mean, the Catholic Protestant thing probably had something to do with it, realistically. But again, this is a guy who just goes to show he was doing his job. And when the war ended and his job was over, he was going to live his life, for forever and ever with his love, Kate. And that's how he saw it. And that's what motivated him to get through life every single day. And unfortunately, it ended quickly for him. And her story of having to live that vow and having to go and carry that. I mean, she only lived for 11 years or so after he died. Yeah. He didn't, or whatever it was. He didn't forget the date, but she didn't live that long. And even though she did move on, you can tell that she always wondered that someday she'll see John again. And that's how she always saw it. So it's an important lesson as we go to Valentine's Day, that tomorrow is promised to nobody. You always tell the people you love them, Mary, because you never know how tomorrow's going to be. And for Kate and John, no matter what happens, they always wish they had just one more day together. So that's that for that. So what's coming up for us next, Mary?
So tonight it'll have passed by the time some people hear this episode, but we are doing our Civil War Breakfast Club roundtable trivia. So thank you to everybody who joined us for that.
And congratulations to Leonard for winning the trivia.
Yeah, because Leonard will probably win again. So, we'll have another episode for you all soon. We'll be announcing the book club soon. I know we keep saying that, but we will do that soon. But as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching if you're watching this on our YouTube. And thank you, Darren, for bringing it like you always do.
Always try to do.
And happy Valentine's Day to you,
Mary. And happy Valentine's to everybody out there. Happy Galentine's Day for all the single ladies who celebrate that. That's a real thing, That's a real thing.
I know.
I'm just saying. Just what it is. Anyway, so enjoy the rest of your day. We look forward to our trivia will be over by the time we drop this on the podcast. But I assume it went swimmingly as always, Mary. But again, we appreciate everybody listening. We always do. And this day of Valentine's Day, we love our listeners. We appreciate everybody who does this. So make sure you enjoy the day and go up there and enjoy your day. If it's snowing here, it's a crappy day in the winter wonderland that is Massachusetts, but we will definitely try to have some fun on Valentine's Day ourselves. So off we go, Mary. The pleasure again was all yours, and we will talk to you and everybody else on the other side.
See y'all later. Bye.
Thank you for being a friend.